Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of my background and bring three threads together: my work as a life and business coach, my work as a creator, as an artist and writer, and then this path called Trillium Awakening. In my profession, so I have about a 20-year career of being a coach, a life coach and a business coach, and people who have been excited about and ready to radically reinvent themselves have come to work with me. Some of my clients have dramatically increased their incomes, doubled, tripled, quadrupled their incomes. Some of them have started businesses based on their passions. Some have gotten out of jobs that they hated into jobs that they loved. Some have found soulmates. Just the full range of human experience in working with me. During this time that I was building my business, I was also participating in the early years in a writing group. And although I didn't identify particularly as a writer, I identified more as a visual artist. I was interested, I had done academic writing and business kinds of writing, but I didn't identify as a creative writer. But I loved the idea of having a regular practice. I had come across Julia Cameron's Artist's Way and had read that and had started to incorporate the morning pages, her recommendation of 2 or 3 pages every morning, into my life. And I had actually been in a couple of groups that had worked around her work. So this invitation to a writing group was intriguing to me, and within the first few sessions I was pretty excited about what I experienced. So I was able to bring forth a kind of writing that I had never done before. I wasn't really clear where it came from. It seemed somewhat mysterious. And I loved it was all women at the time, and I loved the other women that were involved. Eventually, the original group disbanded, and another friend and I continued the practice, and we were both trainers, and I was a coach by that time, and we were interested in bringing this work to more people. So we started to do workshops in our community, and eventually, because not everybody could come to a workshop or commit to a year-long group, we decided to put this process we formalized the process and decided to write a book. So we embarked on that, and now I understand why it can take artists and writers years to complete something. So we spent a number of years, and eventually my friend, who is a writer by profession, wanted to go write her novels and go write her poems, and she was finding working on this nonfiction project not to her liking. So she just handed it to me. I was able to finish the book. It's called Create, and it's an acronym for a 7-step process that leads us into depth creativity that enables us to access divine guidance and universal wisdom. In the process, I started writing poetry, which was not my intention, and I have to say in the beginning made me pretty uncomfortable because I didn't identify as a poet. This is just how my own access to divine wisdom came through. So I'm going to read one of the poems that I wrote. This is called Love's Best Barbecue. I sing my song now loud and clear, so all those present too can hear. The notes are sweet, the notes are long, the words are simple in my song. I tell my story verse by verse, I sing the blessings and the curse. I sing behind me and in front, the words together strange and blunt. In the telling now I know where I've been, which way I'll go. I'll go towards fire, hot and sweet. I'll burn the excess from the meat. I'll burn the hair off and the skin. My bones are charcoal now within. My presence scares the weak of heart, those angry, frightened of their part. Those who've been through fire too, meet me, greet me, sing me blue. Indeed, we are a scary lot, charred and scarred, yet sweet and hot. We smell like love's best barbecue, consumed by life, transformed, now new. Our single purpose till the end, bring the others round the bend, to find us being cosmic fun. So I started writing these pieces, which had a lot to do with consciousness. It seemed like we were drawing material from the subconscious, and then it seemed like we were drawing material from the collective unconscious. And I got more and more curious about that. I was interested in what was actually happening, if there was any kind of science to support our experiences. And I was able to find some work by a woman named Anna Wise called The Awakening Mind, which she experimented with integrated brainwave technology. So the 4 brainwave patterns, beta, alpha, theta, and delta, being measured at the same time on both hemispheres of the brain. And when the mind was awakened, using her language, there was this beautiful pattern, symmetrical pattern of all 4 active brainwaves. So that, to me, explained some of what was happening with our group, although we never had a bilateral EEG to measure it. So fast forward a few years, and I had pretty much finished the book, but it got stalled. Actually, as a creator, I had a pattern of getting about 80% done with things or 90% done with things, and then they would stall. So this was an example of that. Meanwhile, other things were happening in my life that were getting my attention. Things were not going well. And it was about this time that I encountered, so this is the 3rd thread, Trillium Awakening. It had a different name back then. It was called, the work was called Waking Down in Mutuality. And I'm not going to go into all the stories of the name change, but we became known as Trillium Awakening. And so for any of you that are not familiar with the amazing Trillium, it's a native flower here in the Pacific Northwest, other parts of the country and world, but many places it doesn't exist. So you'll notice that the Trillium has 3 petals, and so this work is in the same way surrounds 3 aspects of what I would call our spirituality. So the first petal, or the first aspect, is the awareness, is consciousness. And to awaken in consciousness is something that spiritual seekers have been focused on and working towards for millennia, with very few able to get there or accomplish that or awaken. So coming out of the Eastern traditions, we're pretty used to the notion of a guru and a guru's followers, and typically not a lot of followers awaken in the presence of the guru. In this work, we're not guru-centric, we are aspirant-centric, which means that we don't have gurus, we have teachers. But everyone is on their own path. We recognize that and we honor that. And we find that people awaken quite quickly, often within 2 years, which is pretty remarkable in my experience. So that first petal is about this non-dual consciousness or unity consciousness. So it's a concept that is familiar to most people. I am you as you are me as we are all together. It's all one. But most people hold it as a concept as opposed to a lived experience. So awakening is the process of recognizing it as a lived experience. So that's the first petal, or a little bit about the first petal. The second petal is embodiment. So that is bringing consciousness into the body, bringing it into the physicality of the body, bringing it into the energetics, bringing it into the emotions, bringing it into the mental realm, bringing it into the behavioral patterns, habits, etc. So most spiritual paths that I've encountered, and I'm not a a master or researcher by any means, but most that I had encountered were about transcending. So it's this sort of movement up and out and away from the messiness of this life and this humanity. So this path is about bringing consciousness down and in, and embracing, really radically embracing this being human in all that entails. And then the third petal is mutuality. So that's another, for me, radical departure from most other spiritual paths. Even though we know of spiritual communities, I had never encountered a mystery school or a dharma that really is based in the interaction and relatedness of me and the other. So Trillium Awakening is grounded in mutuality. So it's about me being whole and awakening and honoring and respecting of myself, at the same time honoring and respecting this whole other being, even when there's difference, even when there's disagreement, even when there's conflict. Mutuality doesn't mean that we're always nice, or that everything always works out, or that necessarily even that problems get resolved quickly or easily, or at all. It's just about this rub that we honor and acknowledge, and we make room for it, and it catalyzes everyone's process. So when I found this path, I had spent a lot of time and energy in my life on self-help, quite a bit on therapy, other kinds of healing systems. And I know there was some progress there, but I felt like I had limited, not a whole lot to show for it. So this might be you too. Sometimes we get to a place where we want to transcend the messiness of this life. We're looking for a way out, really. It's like, there must be an easier way. If you're longing for wholeness, if you're longing for wellness, if you're longing for groundedness and a sense of peace, this path may have something to offer you. If you ask and desire to know what your true nature is, which is at the heart of all spiritual seeking, is who am I? Who am I? What is really my true nature and what is happening here? If your life strategies and patterns are not working anymore, which is where I found myself when Trillium emerged in my life, things just weren't working. Things that had worked in the past, it was a tough time. So if you're just discouraged that you haven't attained the results that you want, it could be that this is worth exploring. I can say for me that I am no longer a seeker, and this is after 40 years, 45 years of seeking, of always this urge to find that answer, or to know, or to understand. And those questions have been put to rest for me. So the good news is that awakening does not require perfection. So you can awaken right now as you are, who you are. And the rest of the good news is it also doesn't confer perfection. So you are still who you are in your life, as your life. I know for me that I had a lot of fantasies, and I had bought into a lot of mythologies about awakening. So I did think that, the big white light would descend and I would be in 24/7 bliss. All my problems would go away. I certainly wouldn't have to pay bills anymore or deal with money. Relationships would be perfect. I would always get along with everybody and everybody would love me. So that actually didn't happen, and that's okay, because although I still have, quote, problems, unquote, I don't relate to them in the way that I did before. So when something comes up that might not be what I prefer, I'm just much more accepting of it, and I can rest in this wholeness and health in a way that enables me to be more present, creative, and active in my own life. So I have kind of a definition. It's kind of awkward, but I'm going to try it. So what is this awakening? It's an embodied recognition of the paradoxical simultaneity of our divinity and our humanity, expressing through the unique particularity of you or me in relation to others. So some of the key words there are paradox and simultaneity and particularity. So it is unique. Awakening is unique to each person. I think that was another myth that I had held before, was that somehow it was the same for everybody, that everybody's going to have a similar or exactly the same experience, and it's not that way. This path, and really all of life, is full of paradox, and to whatever extent that we can learn to embrace and welcome that, there's a lot of relief, and that relief releases energy that can then be attuned to consciousness and awareness, and so that capacity grows and grows and grows over time. So there are 4 pretty predictable stages that most people go through. The first one is called the rot. So that was the one I talked about where things in my life weren't working. I even actually had a sewer line break at that point. So very dramatic, kind of metaphorical but also real experience of the rot. So it can be a dark time. Sometimes, some people call that the dark night of the soul. If a person is given the opportunity, or maybe sometimes even on their own and by chance, we can from that point drop into what we call the core mystery or the core condition. It's also in this work called the core wound. I don't like to use that term anymore, although at the time that I first experienced it, it was appropriate. So it is that place where our divinity and our humanity inexorably rub against each other, and it can be painful, and until we recognize that it's a natural and inevitable expression of who we are in this life, it can be a difficult recognition and a difficult experience. So once someone really lands in that place, in that mystery, usually awakening happens fairly quickly after that. And for some people it is sort of a big fireworks show. For me it was. I had an event, but it's not an event, it's an ongoing process. So I'm continuing to awaken, as is everyone. Some people never have fireworks, but they have these incremental shifts until they are comfortable owning and recognizing their awakening. It's a little bit like the centipede. So here's this line, and centipede gets 2 arms and legs over it. Is that awakening, or is that not? And then the next 2, and the next 2, and the next 2. So we call those people who approach awakening that way oozers. So they ooze into it as opposed to leaping. And then once that awakening starts to become stabilized, we call that the divine reconfiguration. So it really is, in some ways, like this spiritual reorganization, reconfiguration, rebuilding of who we are as a person. For most of us who participate with any regularity on this path, the average is about 2 years for people to have an embodied awakening. For me, it was about a year, but I took longer to get there than many do. So if this interests you, I'm going to make a couple of recommendations. One is to have an attitude of due diligence. So that's the attitude you bring to assessing a new business or any kind of new project. Like you want to kick the tires, you want to do some research, you want to talk to people, you want to see, is this the right thing? Is this the right time? Is this for me? And I was actually quite skeptical when I encountered this work. I'd read a lot of books, I'd seen a lot of paths, and I just really didn't want one more cosmology and one more language and one more, But the resistance was normal and natural and healthy, and I moved through it. I'm grateful for that now. So due diligence. There are 2 practices that really help. One is called tanking up on transmission. So we're all transmitting all the time. And within this body, this school, there's a particular resonance for people who work in this work. So hanging out with those people, seeing if there's a resonance there for you. Does it charge you? Do you feel enlivened? Are you excited? Or is it a or a no way? The other practice is whole being listening. So I talked about that with the gazing. It's really being 100% fully here as well as 100% and fully there listening to the other. Which, as a coach, I was really good at listening to other people, but I had pretty much tuned out what was happening over here, except some mental activity. So this was a new practice for me, so 100% and 100%. And then there are 3 tracks that are useful. So the first one is publications, and there are books, there are websites, there are videos, there are interviews at Bat Gap, Buddha at the Gas Pump. There are events, so we're very fortunate here in Olympia in that we have monthly events. We have 2 teachers here. I'm one of them. There's another teacher locally, and then there are about 30 people in our core community and about 30 more that come to events and such. There are also events all over the country, really, so Bay Area and San Diego and Atlanta, Ashland, Chicago, Fairfield, Iowa, the East Coast. And there are virtual events, so people who are isolated from other Trillium Awakening practitioners can join a virtual mutuality group or work with a teacher in that way. So if you're interested, the local website is www.trilliumolympia.org, and the international website is trilliumawakening.org. My website is naturalcoach.com, and I would be happy to answer any questions that might come up or to help you explore next steps. So thank you for your kind presence and attention, and I'm going to close with another poem. This is not mine. This is a poem by Matt Licata, whose work I just dearly love. I don't know that he has any association or knowledge of Trillium Awakening, but his poetry is just exactly who we are and what we're about. So this is called There is a Wild Grace That is Everywhere. There is no need to transcend anything here, for you have taken birth in a sacred world. Whatever arises in your immediate embodied experience is none other than the path itself, a gateway into the wild dimension of love. Even your despair, your confusion, your fear, your anger, and your sadness are revelations of intelligence pouring into this reality to expose a secret place within you. From the perspective of awakened mind, there is no bias for wisdom over neurosis, divine over human, or clarity over confusion. For anything met with pure awareness and open warmth is self-liberated into the ground of being itself. This is a spirituality of intimacy, friends, of the breaking open of your naked, messy, vulnerable heart. Fall into the unknown and come closer, and even closer than that. There is a wild grace that is everywhere, that keeps the stars from falling out of the sky. It is the same grace that has assembled you as you are, cell by cell. Thank you.